I guess thinking about, the current circumstances, the last 6 months, obviously, we've seen lots of challenges as far as, COVID, but I think there's also obviously been some fantastic opportunities. And one of the big things is around how companies operate from home, how they work remotely, how they work as teams. And in a way, when I was thinking about this the other day and reflecting on this, in a way, tech companies should be very well set up to do this. Not only are they tech focused, but when we think about the types of ways that tech teams themselves work, they will often have remote teams operating. They might have teams who are working across time zones. They might be working in structured sprints around agile. So it should, in theory, be a very good sort of use case as far as, tech startups, tech scale-ups. They should be able to adjust to that, relatively easily. Is that the case? Is that what you've seen in your portfolio? How are they managing with both their business sides as well as their tech sides? And perhaps, Andrew, on this occasion, maybe I'll go to the tech side first.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, the lockdown has been enforced on everybody, so there was no time to consider really, and so everybody moved out and went home and operated, and on the whole, in Europe, it's been very successful. I think the challenges we're starting to face now actually is how does this continue? Because the teams that were deployed 5 or 6 months ago already existed. They largely came out of either distributed or centralized organizations, and that culture, they went home with that culture, with the knowing the unwritten rules.
Yeah.
And so I think now that the challenges which are coming very, very fast are around recruitment, how perhaps the choices on who is recruited will change. But certainly the onboarding and bringing staff in where they haven't had any face-to-face time and may live several hundred miles apart. It's going to be very interesting. I don't have the answers, but certainly we're starting to see it. And how will cultures change in existing companies? It's going to be very interesting to see.
Absolutely. And I think going maybe to you, James, ditto from your side on the business side of things. Are companies working well in that sense? Is it harder to build customers and thinking about that side of things?
I've been really pleasantly and positively surprised, actually. I was maybe it's just my cynical nature, but I wondered whether at the start, if we go back to March this year, it was maybe some sort of apocalyptic vision as to what was going to happen, and actually it wasn't anything close to that. In fact, and I'm making a massive generalization here, I think people have embraced it generally, because there are undeniably lots and lots of benefits from remote working. Whether it's financial. I mean, the cost saving is just enormous in terms of travel and expense. And someone myself, I live a long way outside of London. All that money has been saved. I think the fact that people are generally traveling less feels to me to be inherently an environmental good, and I support that. I've got 3 kids that I've been locked down with for 160 days. Not always been perfect, but massive benefits to that too. From a family perspective, it's been wonderful. My eldest daughter, teenagers, had nearly 6 months off school, so she'd say it's the best thing that's ever happened in the history of the world ever. So all of that stuff that's perhaps slightly outside of the professional parameters of your question, but still, I think really, really positive. I think for me as a sales guy, perhaps slightly different to Andrew, sales teams and sales managers have had to manage remotely for quite a while. I've run sales teams all over the world. as Andrew knows, ran sales teams in the States and in multiple time zones. So I'm old enough to remember when video conferencing was just a nightmare. It just never worked. It was that we didn't have the network infrastructure underneath it to be able to get a proper service. Fortunately, technology has moved on, and we've been able to get around it. But as I say, I've been running salespeople in Australia and the US and all over, and you've had to manage them remotely. The downside for me, and you mentioned it in your question when you talked about customers, is I'm sure we can all accept there is a huge amount of nuance and subtlety in human communication, in human interaction, and I would say the ideal is that you would be in a room face to face with that person, of course, and I'm not going to deny that. If you're having a difficult conversation, or you're having a strategic conversation, or you're having any kind of conversation of some sort of import, you would rather be there with them. But overall, my assessment is we've managed really well. And to Andrew's point, I think the next stage where we move from complete lockdown into something more of a hybrid model, I'm really excited about it, actually. I really am. I hope people can spend less time in the office, less time traveling to the office, and more time getting on with their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I agree with both of your sides. And it's something which we've certainly seen reflected in our cohorts as well. And I think maybe going to the challenges to start with, the companies who we have found who have really had challenges, I guess, is where they are, I would hope, more short-term challenges around, like you said, it might be that their product or proposition just doesn't work in a remote environment. We might have companies who are based on the idea that they do support for things which are based in offices, or where, they offer products which is, based on, I don't know, entertainment products in conference halls or something like that. So those types of companies obviously are struggling with that side of things, just as far as their product doesn't fit the market anymore. And the hope is obviously that the market moves on. And to your point, James, I think getting to that point where we can have a hybrid, I think is really interesting. But talking to that sort of more positive side, I completely agree. I think, especially thinking about startups and scale-ups where, cash is king, right? Anything which saves you money surely has to be a good thing, right? So to be able to actually say, okay, we don't have as many office costs, we don't have travel costs. And from a personal cost basis, you don't have to pay for travel cards and all of these types of things. That I think is a big plus. The other thing, and I think your point around having managed sales teams globally as well, it does offer, I think, a real opportunity where if you have had companies who are set up to maybe have, sales teams which only worked in person, right? The fact that you can set up for that end vision of how do we manage to do this globally, remotely, in a way forces them to set themselves up for global growth from the start. So you're setting up a business which inherently then is set up to scale, because you're not tied to the sort of the human in-person sort of contact, or at least you can have a bit of a mix of those approaches as well. So I think I agree with you both, some really fantastic opportunities there as far as, as we've all seen, the acceleration of technology and the adoption of technologies, and especially I think for technology-based businesses, the impact that has had to basically have all of these enterprise clients who maybe previously might have dragged their feet a little bit, who have forced themselves to basically adopt technologies very fast and at scale. I think that creates an amazing opportunity actually as far as technology businesses building growth in those areas as well.
Amali, a question for you. How Microsoft, obviously one of the biggest, most well-known brands in the world and a technology leader, how have they responded and reacted to this? How have they done it? Are they leading, do you think, in this respect?
Absolutely, and I think in a way we have a bit of an unfair advantage, right? Because a big part of what we do is actually supporting remote working. So, even if I think just about the startups team, myself as the UK managing director, there are 9 other managing directors all over the world. We have worked completely, remotely from each other since the beginning. We hold our conference calls on Teams. We have, our Teams folders have all our shared documents, so we share them globally between that. When it comes to our team meetings, we rotate the time zones, we record all of them so that even if you're asleep at the time, you can go in and watch the recordings and people can have conversations in teams around those strategies and documents in a way which is truly sort of, 24 hours round, depending on where you kind of sit. So for us, it really was an interesting process. And actually, when I think about when COVID hit, we were in the midst of our AI for Good cohort. So this is a group of really fantastic companies who we support through Microsoft, where these are focused on social mission. So we have companies who are doing anything from AI identification and sort of of let's say rubbish, right? So they use analytics to kind of look how can we identify rubbish and kind of classify them so you reduce wastage. We have companies who offer tools for people with speech impediments. So they have again sort of machine learning hardware and software which basically then looks at people's speech patterns, breathing patterns, and then offers them kind of support and coaching around learning that as well. So these are amazing types of companies who were very small, a little bit earlier stage than most of the companies we worked with. And in the midst of our program with them, we had to move them to 100% online environment. And it was work. Our programs manager, Edith, does an amazing job getting us all up and running with that. But actually, it wasn't as hard as I think we expected it to be. And part of that was because I guess as Microsoft, we're set up to do that. We that's the way that we had always, we'd worked in the last few years. So for us, it's really been an extension of things, and especially around, I guess it's fair to say, things like our Teams tools. There's been huge growth in usage, obviously, as we support a lot of our clients with those types of challenges we were talking about earlier as well on that. So I think we're getting to the last few questions now. I was reading an article just this morning about alternative VCs, and we've heard a lot about things like crowdfunding and all of these types of things, and there are lots of ways, I think, going to your point earlier, of making money, right, or raising money, should I say, for a company. A little provocative question: do you think that there is still a role for VCs in the sort of the future, with everything going digital, with all of these resources being available? Is there still a role for VCs to play in developing companies, or can companies kind of just do this themselves, Google it and use platforms? James, maybe if I go to you first.
Well, I think they can. I think it's perfectly possible, and I can honestly say, Amali, I have been in meetings with entrepreneurs, with startup founders. They've told me their story and they've outlined their ambition, and I've come to the conclusion that venture capital isn't right for them. So I would never think that we're the answer to every question, because we're just not. There are plenty of businesses out there who just simply need to go and speak to their bank manager. And short-term debt will do it for a period of time. Venture capital, like any industry, I think, or with any product, if you like, needs to evolve. It needs to develop and adapt and change over time. We definitely do. I go back to what I said before. It's not just capital. I don't think. I think there's a term that we use in the industry, private equity use it as well, which is called platform, which is the operational expertise, the network leverage. It's the other stuff that you provide to your investments above and beyond just money. And I think Andrew and I are the embodiment of that, actually, certainly at Frog, in that the senior partnership team here have decided to invest in having people like us and our operating partner colleagues who, for better or for worse, have done it before and are happy to provide the benefit of that experience back into their investments. But I'll just say one other thing, which is that when COVID really bit in the spring, and that sort of top line brand new business revenue growth kind of went out the window for a couple of quarters, and across the board, all of the businesses that I was working with hunkered down, looked at cost, moved on to the various domestic furlough schemes around the world, and essentially focusing on their existing install base, making sure their customers were fine and happy. I was so impressed with the way that the venture capitalists, growth capital investors like Frog, almost universally just got in the corner of their businesses. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Whether it was, super speedy expediting of loan notes, or whether it was, convertible bridging facilities that could just be, immediately go onto the company balance sheet as soon as possible, just shoring the business up so that because you said it earlier, cash, it is still king. It was when I was running and selling businesses, and it still is today. You can have a fabulous business, but if you haven't got the readies, you're gonna run out of oxygen pretty quickly. And so we have that. We have the capital. We have that available to us. So the super fast deployment of money back into those businesses, I think it just gave the CEOs, certainly in the Frog portfolio, just a big warm blanket where they were able to just go, right, okay, I don't have to worry about the single most worrying thing, cash. I don't have to worry about that because Frog have taken care of that. We've got them. As I say, they're in our corner. I can now focus on my staff. I can now focus on my customers. I can focus on my other stakeholders. And genuinely and sincerely, I think not only was I seriously impressed, but I think that's a significant part of the answer to your question, because that's something, with the greatest of respect to crowdfunding, it just couldn't do. You simply couldn't do what the VC industry did at that point. So fair play to them.
Amazing. And yes, I remember certainly when I was having lots of conversations with VCs when sort of the whole Corona situation was kicking off. It was front and center for all of them, which is, how do I help my business? How do I help them to continue to be successful through these tricky times? And just going out of their ways to make sure that they can connect them to those support resources. So wholeheartedly agree on that one.
Yeah, and just to add, operational expertise is crucial. So is there still a role for VCs? I think it's changing, and it will continue to change. And one of the things, we touched on it already with Frog, is we get involved right from the start with businesses that we're looking to invest in, and then post investment. And the operating partner program does draw on expertise from all facets, whether it's sales and marketing, in my case technology, and getting involved, not being overbearing, but really showing a genuine interest in the business. It's adding value beyond capital.
Yeah, it makes such a difference for that company just to know that someone else cares about them. I think it makes a bit, fabulous. So I think that was a really, really interesting conversation. Thank you both so much for that. What an amazing kind of series of questions, and some great insights into Frog and how you operate as well. As we wrap up, I always like to get a bit of an inside track. We've got you both on the line here. Any exciting new announcements from your side? Can we get a bit of a sneaky peek at any good things coming on the horizon for Frog?